Hey guys, and welcome to chapter 24. Very excited. We're almost done. Chapter 24, we're almost done with all the infectious diseases. Okay. This is about microbial diseases of the urinary and reproductive systems. Okay, so right off the bat, we have to remember that anatomically, the female urinary and reproductive systems are going to be basically, for the most part, not connected. And then for the males, the urinary and reproductive system are going to be at some certain points connected. So that's something to consider as we move on to the rest of the chapter. Let's talk about the structure. Okay, the structure of the urinary and reproductive system. So like I said, urinary and reproductive systems of females are anatomically distinct, while with males, you're going to have some similarities, some things where some features that are going to be shared. So let's look at the urinary system. So everyone, male and female, of course, have goodness, I was about to say something silly. So we have kidneys, right? It all basically starts off at these wonderful organs, the kidneys that help basically remove toxins and waste from our blood system. And basically when they remove this waste from the blood, it's going to be excreted as urine. And so it has specific things within the kidney, actually. I think, there we go. You look at this picture, we have the capsule, the renal capsule, and then we have the cortex, which is kind of a lighter color, and then in the middle, like the middle part is known as the renal medulla. And in the renal medulla, we have these things known as renal pyramids, and they kind of look like upside down pyramids right here. And as you can see, they basically all, like the pointy part, all kind of trickles in to the renal pelvis, like this kind of hollow concave structure that receives all of this, whatever filters through these renal pyramids. And these renal pyramids are made out of nephrons. And basically what nephrons are just like these masses, like this massive, like ball-like mass of capillaries, of blood capillaries, which we call glomeruli. And so you have these glomeruli. And so you have this blood kind of trickling through all this place that gets that gets basically filtered, and so all of the waste from the blood gets filtered out right here in these renal pyramids because of these nephrons. So very, very important. We're not going to go into like the whole details of like the loop and everything. There's no need. But basically, essentially, like all of these renal pyramids are covered to the brim with nephrons that they're essentially glomeruli. I can't pronounce it. Oh my goodness. And so this is the actual function where the function of the where the function of the kidneys actually occurs is these nephrons, where they filter out the waste in the blood and they take away the waste and they make it into urine. And so that's why they kind of trickle down into the renal pelvis. And then from here, right, we have, oops, I was going the wrong way. From here, the urine is going to be brought through the ureter to our bladder, and then from our bladder, through our urethra, and then out. Okay, so we have kidneys, ureter, bladder, and then it goes through the urethra. Same thing with males, kidneys, ureter, bladder, urethra. The urethra, and this is actually a really important point, the urethra in females is obviously a lot shorter than the urethra in males. And this is an important thing to think about, because the urethra does have, can be, since it has access to the outside, it's going to have presence of bacteria. And so it's something that we have to consider, because it's very vulnerable to basically the bacterial presence. And if that happens, you can get all sorts of urinary tract infections, usually stem right here at the urethra. While males, because it's a lot longer, they are not as prone to having urinary tract infections. So of course it can happen, but since it's a lot longer, it's not as common with them. Oh yeah, and of course the urinary bladder, stores the urine until it can be eliminated, right? Thankfully, it has like long, wonderful, like stretchy cells to it, so that's good, because that'd be bad if they weren't stretching. Okay, so the urine is excreted via the urethra. Perfect. So let's move on to the reproductive system and ovaries. Okay, so we're going to be doing the female reproductive system first. And remember, with the female reproductive system and the female urinary system, they are anatomically distinct. They're detached. They're not part of each other, though they are very close in proximity. So with the female reproductive system, we of course have the ovaries that make the ova or the eggs. We have the fallopian tubes. We have the uterus, the vagina, and then any kind of external genitalia, which includes things like that, are like the clitoris, the labia, that kind of stuff. So how much do I talk about these? I'm not going to go into too much detail. I feel like everyone basically has a firm understanding of what the female reproductive system is, right? So this is all like kind of connected. So yeah, should I talk about it? I'm going to see what the book says and then I'll get back to you. Okay, so your book does kind of go over a little bit about like fertilization and what it actually means when an ova gets fertilized with a sperm, and how, you know, it can, basically the zygote embeds itself within the uterine wall and then we start forming the placenta, etc. But I don't think I'm going to go into it that much because it's just not necessary. So yeah, right? Anyways, so those are basically the structures of the female reproductive system. Of course, the microorganisms can invade the female reproductive tract via the moist mucosa membrane of the vagina. So with the vaginal mucous membrane, it provides actually a fantastic environment for certain bacteria. And especially during sexual intercourse, a lot of this bacteria can basically wedge itself in there. However, because of just the normal microbiome that we have in our vaginal tract, we have kind of a defense mechanism already set in place towards like invading unwanted, inhospitable bacteria. And this is because the bacteria that we already have basically found within our vaginal tract actually end up making, they ferment, they're able to ferment. And so they make a very acidic environment of pH of about 4.5, so quite an acidic environment. And so that acidic environment by itself, inhibits the growth of most other bacteria that are accidentally introduced via sexual intercourse or something like that. So it's important. We have all sorts of different kinds of bacteria in our vaginal tract, a lot of lactobacilli, even some streptococci, there's all sorts, even some bacteroides, there's all sorts of bacteria. But the lactobacilli are the really important ones because these are the ones that actually break down glycogen, which are just basically storage of glucose. So they ferment glucose and they make lactic acid from it. And that lactic acid contributes to that 4.5, actually provides and makes that pH, the 4.5 pH, and thereby inhibits other bacteria from invading and harming us. In fact, it's when this particular pH, when that is tampered with and when it therefore increases, then at that point you can be more susceptible to getting any kind of infection or what have you, right? So it's really important to have a pH of about 4.5. Yeah, pH of about 4.5. And what else? Yeah, it's interesting because so lactobacillus, in order for it to go ahead and ferment the glucose, it actually needs to have glucose or glycogen storages. And it's interesting to think about because it's very dependent on the estrogen hormone. The more estrogen hormone you have, right, which usually happens around puberty and after puberty, etc., the more glycogen storage you have near your vaginal tract, and therefore the lactobacillus bacteria can actually ferment it and make a lactic acid and therefore an acidic environment for your vaginal tract. However, in women or in females that are like prepubescent or like younger, or even when you're when a woman is going through like the menstrual cycle or during her period or something, and they have fluctuations in estrogen, and if you're a prepubescent girl, you're going to have lower estrogen levels. Those lower or fluctuating estrogen levels are not going to give as much, are going to make it so that there's not a lot of glycogen in your reproductive tract. And so because of that, your pH is going to falter, right? Because the lactobacillus don't have anything essentially, or a fluctuating amount of glycogen to actually ferment. So that's something to take into consideration. So there even after puberty and everything, there can be specific times in a woman's like monthly, lifetime where they're a little bit more vulnerable to attacks just because their pH has been compromised in some way. So the reproductive organisms of a male, so we have the testes, the scrotums, you have all of these systems of ducts, right, like the vas deferens, etc. Accessory glands like the prostate gland, which is where the vas deferens kind of, kind of meets the urethra and then the penis. So here you start seeing the reproductive system of the males that it kind of comes together with the urinary tract. In fact, the vas deferens, it meets the prostate gland, it kind of meets the urethra. And so any kind of excretion of, the semen and urine happens from the same place in males. While in females, we have one particular entrance for the vaginal tract, right? And then one entrance or one exit, actually, I should say, for the urethra, another one. All right, so yeah, the urinary or sexually transmitted microbes can invade the urethra, even though it doesn't happen as often as females. It can also invade the skin of the penis, especially if the person has the foreskin. If they still have the foreskin, that's a very easy place to get infected. Okay. Yeah. All right, so the microbiome, and I kind of already touched upon this, I'm sorry guys, but the microbiome of the urinary and reproductive system, the urethra normally has some microbial growth. It's chiefly though like avirulent species like Lactobacillus, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, both males and females. So it does have some growth, but because it's like I said before, it's that opening. It is an open. Any place you have openings in your body, you're going to have some bacterial growth in them. But there's really not as many as when you think of something like a place like the vaginal reproductive tract. Yeah. Occasionally, other bacteria, such as species of Microbacterium, Bacteroides, etc., can colonize the distal end of the urethra. In both male and females, the rest of the urinary organs and the urine itself are actually exenic. So it's interesting. Have you guys ever heard of when you hurt yourself in nature, you have to pee on yourself or something? You know what I'm talking about? I'm not insane. I think I watched too much Naked and Afraid. Okay, but or maybe I don't watch enough. Apparently, I think I don't watch enough. Anyways, I've always heard that if you hurt yourself and you don't have anything to kind of, clean your wounds with, you can use your own urine. But the thing is, even though your urine is exenic in the bladder, right? Even though the urine is technically bacteria-free in the bladder, as soon as it goes to the urethra, because remember, the urethra has bacteria, the end of usually the distal end of the urethra has bacteria. As soon as the urine goes out, it becomes, it all of a sudden has bacteria, so it's technically incorrect to do that. I don't know. There may be other reasons as to why we pee on our wounds. I don't know. I'm going to research that. Maybe you guys know. You guys can let me know. I don't know that. I'm not going to research that. I'm going to let my students teach me. So yeah. So it's normally exenic due to the normally acidic pH of the urine and the flushing action of the urination. But again, as soon as it comes out of the urethra, it's always going to have a little bit of the bacteria. It's never completely exenic. It's only exenic really in the bladder. The vagina is home to a wider assortment of microorganisms that varies with the levels of hormones, particularly estrogens. Like I said, estrogen levels rise, you usually have more glycogen, and therefore you usually have more of an acidic environment. And this acidic environment inhibits the growth of many opportunistic pathogens. Okay, so the microbiomes of the urethra and the vagina, they serve to protect the body by outcompeting pathogens. So there we have that microbial antagonism that we know so well. And the microorganisms in the urethra can move up to infect the kidneys as well. When that happens, we don't like that. That's glomerulitis. We don't want that. Opportunistic and sexually transmitted microbes can infect the reproductive system also. So now, as we'll get to see, there's plenty of bacteria that can infect your urine. If they go to the correct areas in your urinary system or in the reproductive system, they can infect and they can cause horribly painful things. All right, so that's the end of part 1, and I shall see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.